Hello everybody. Whoops, sorry, let me just get set up here a little bit better. Today we will be reviewing Halloween 2. Sorry, bear with me for a second. So, in this movie, I did take notes again, because for movies I like to take notes so I can remember everything. So I can do a little bit more of an in-depth analysis. So I'm just going to give you guys kind of a forewarning in each video now that my reviews are more in-depth, kind of going like scene by scene to give you an interpretation of what's happening in the movie. So if you're not into that, just leave. If you want to go watch the movie first and then come back and watch this, that's fine. Or if you've already seen the movie, then follow through with me. So in the very first scene in this movie, we start off in Haddonfield, Illinois on October 31st, 1978. So very same day as the first movie took place. Mr. Sandman starts playing. Love that song for this movie, actually, because basically Mr. Sandman is supposed to be like the boogeyman, right? Which is what Michael Myers is supposed to be in this movie. He's a boogeyman type character, just won't die no matter what. So this starts off with where the very first movie ended, where Michael is shot by Dr. Loomis 6 times, I might add, 6 times. Then we go to basically the opening of this movie. After that, Dr. Loomis finds Michael's blood in the yard. The next door neighbor comes rushing out because he's heard the gunshots, comes out. Dr. Loomis tells them to call the sheriff. The neighbor responds by saying, "Is this some kind of joke? I've been trick-or-treated to death tonight," and Dr. Loomis tells him, "You don't know what death is," which is a kind of an iconic line as far as I'm concerned in this movie. So then we go into the next scene. The camera shows the first-person view, so if you don't understand what the first-person view is, it's like, it's kind of hard to explain, but I guess like what you would see if you were Michael. So the camera shows that first-person view of what we assume is Michael, as we see Dr. Loomis and the sheriff pull up in the distance, with Dr. Loomis screaming, "I shot him 6 times. I shot him in the heart. He's not human." Michael enters this old couple's home, steals a large kitchen knife. Then he goes over to the next door neighbor's house besides them. We hear this girl on the phone talking about Mr. and Mrs. Elron screaming, mainly Mrs. Elron, because she finds blood from Michael on her cutting board after hearing on the news that these killings have happened and someone has escaped from this mental asylum. Then you hear the radio telling of the murders in Haddonfield. Michael kills the young girl who was the next door neighbor to Mr. and Mrs. Elron. Then in the next scene, the paramedic takes Laurie out of the house she was in on a stretcher. She keeps repeating, "Don't let them put me to sleep." That's when we find out in the ambulance conversation between Bud and Jimmy, which will be more prominent characters as I go on, that Laurie's last name is Strode. That will be important later on in this review. Laurie arrives at the hospital. The doctors assess Laurie's wounds. They say again that they will have to put her out. Again, she begs for them not to put her to sleep. And then we go to the next scene, where Dr. Loomis and the sheriff are hunting for Michael. They're having this conversation. The sheriff says it's ridiculous. He's going to stop taking orders from Dr. Loomis. All of a sudden, they see this person in the same type of mask as Michael Myers. So Dr. Loomis jumps out of the car thinking that it's Michael, chases after him, tells everybody to move out of the way, goes to shoot at him. This person in the mask runs out into the street, gets hit by the incoming cop car, which basically drags this person down the street. They run into a van. There's a huge explosion. This person burns to death. And then at this point in time, Dr. Loomis is kind of like, has his hand over his face like this, and a weird look on his face. So I thought, because it's been a while since I've seen been a year since I've seen these movies, because I usually watch them every year around Halloween time. So what I thought he was basically saying was that he'd realized that it wasn't Michael, as another cop car pulls up to inform the sheriff that 3 more bodies were found, and one of them was Annie, which, if you remember from the first movie, Annie was the sheriff's daughter. Okay, so then we move... Wait, did I mess something up? Okay, so then we move on to the next scene back in the hospital. Jimmy comes to check on Laurie. Then the sheriff identifies Annie. Michael appears again. It's kind of this weird scene where this one nurse is talking to her friend. She has to take her home and then go to the hospital. She ends up being late for work. That's when Michael appears again, this kid with the radio, as it's like boombox on his shoulder, is playing the news, talking about this person that has escaped in these killings, and then he bumps into Michael, and then the music starts playing. Michael walks down the sidewalk in front of all these people. This cop car passes him, and then you see this sign for the Haddonfield Memorial Hospital. Then the nurse that dropped off her friend arrives at the hospital. You see Michael's mask in the side mirror, one of the side mirrors of the car, so you know Michael has arrived at the hospital. Then it goes over to the security guard. It shows Michael walking through the grounds of the hospital, but the security guard doesn't catch it because he's not paying attention. There's talks of Michael being spotted between some of the hospital employees from somebody else, but I guess Bud doesn't believe the nurse that's telling him, because Michael didn't escape till the night after this other girl is claiming that her friend saw Michael. Then the doors to the stairs close slowly. I believe as Jimmy passed them, or was it the nurse? It could have been Jimmy or the nurse. I can't quite remember. And then the camera goes back to the first-person view of Michael. You now know that he is inside the hospital because he is on the stairwell. The head nurse starts talking to the nurse that was late, as you see Michael walk across the hallway, because he's clearly in the room now, close to them. So you can see him, the first-person view of him watching them, and then he walks across the hallway. Then it goes back to Jimmy and Laurie having this conversation. He tells her about Michael Myers escaping. Laurie's kind of confused as to why. She asks why Michael would come after her. All of a sudden, this nurse throws the door open to Laurie's room. They're checking on the phones. The phones are dead, so you know Michael's already been planning ahead, kind of thing. Just like he did in the first movie when he did the phone cutting thing, so they couldn't call back and forth. Then Laurie checks the phone. She realizes there's no dial tone, so that's when she starts to get really worried. Then we go to the next scene where the security guard is going to check on, or he's told to come check on something. I can't remember what now. But anyway, he hears something outside as I think he was having a cigarette, possibly. Or he was just taking a break. Anyway, he hears something for the trash can, so he goes in there. Of course, the old cat trick where the cat jumps out and scares him. Then all of a sudden he finds the lock on the back door is busted into the storage room. He tries to radio for Karen, saying that someone has broken into the storage room, that someone should drive to the sheriff's station. But Karen's only receiving static, so she doesn't hear anything that he said. Then he finds another lock busted. There's a missing hammer from the storage room. Karen calls for Mr. Garrett, but no answer. Then Mr. Garrett's going down the hallway. He's already dropped his radio, so that's why Karen can't call him. She doesn't know how to work the radio properly. Mr. Garrett opens the door to the closet. There's nothing in there. Then when he closes the door, Michael is standing right next to him and kills him with the hammer. The old 1970s really slow kill kind of thing, where it like zooms in on the kill area. I always find those funny. Karen tries to radio again. Eventually she just gives up and goes back to work because she has to be back on the floor. Then in the next scene, Dr. Loomis identifies the body as best as he can. He's told that it would take hours to actually run the actual tests and like actually identify the person. So I guess the moral of the story here is I messed up in the scene before thinking that Dr. Loomis knew that it wasn't Michael. I guess he didn't. So then they go to the Myers house. This mob is destroying the Myers house. Dr. Loomis is explaining to the other cops that Michael is drawn to this house. He's coming back because it's basically the anniversary of his parents' death. So he explains a little bit about that in detail. Then all of a sudden these kids run up to Dr. Loomis worried about their friend who was age 17 who never came back from the party. So they figured that must be the person who was hit by the cop car. So Dr. Loomis says run his dental records. Then we go to scene 7 with Bud. That will come up in a second. Laurie dreams of Michael in the asylum. Bud and the nurse begin to hook up in the hot tub. I'm not really sure if it's an actual hot tub, but it was something in the hospital. Then you see Michael's hand come up. He turns up the temp slowly. The nurse tells Bud to go check on the temperature. She gets out of the hot tub. Michael kills Bud behind her in the background. Then he walks up behind her and touches her neck. She thinks it's Bud, so she starts talking to him. She turns around and comes face to face with Michael, who drowns her in the scalding water. Then we go back to the next scene. It appears Michael has broken into the school. Dr. Loomis and the cops find this drawing of a family with a sister stabbed with a knife from earlier that he stole from the house. Ooh, that scared me. Pen just rolling hit my leg. Then they go up to the front of the classroom. Sam Hain has written in blood on the chalkboard. Apparently Sam Hain means Lot of the Dead, the end of summer. And the festival Sam Hain is on October 31st. So this all ties into the Halloween theme. Then I believe it's the woman from the first movie whose name is... Just let me find it here. Whose name is... Okay, I can't find it here. Anyway, I'm pretty sure it's her from the first movie because he says he barely recognized her and asked her what she was doing there. So anyway, Dr. Loomis has been ordered to go back to Smith Groves by Dr. Rogers and the governor. Dr. Loomis explains that he can't leave, but is told that he has no choice, basically because he knows Michael is still somewhere there. Then in the next scene, Jimmy checks on Laurie again, tells her he won't let anything happen to her, but Laurie has gone into some sort of trance-like state because Jimmy like waves his hand over her face and nothing happens. She's just like blank-faced. Karen runs to go get Dr. Mixter, who was a doctor that in the beginning, we finally find out his name, trying to explain that Laurie has had a reaction to the medication she's been given, but she gets no answer. She reaches for Dr. Mixer's chair, turns it around. He's dead, needle in the eye, clearly been killed by Michael. Karen backs up, and this was, honestly, I took a picture of this for Instagram, so if you go over to my Instagram, after this I'll have this picture posted. It's like the creepiest scene, I think, in any of these movies. Karen backs up, and all you see is like one side of Michael's mask, and then he just comes forward out of the darkness. It's really creepy. Kind of gives me chills even talking about it now. It's a really creepy but really well done scene, and I'm really into these movies. So Karen backs up. Michael steps out of the darkness. Michael kills her with a needle by injecting it. And if you're squeamish with eyes and stuff, maybe look away for this scene, because it's basically like right here in her temple. And then he pushes the plunger, and I'm assuming that would be the air bubble effect, if there's nothing else in the syringe for the needle, that he killed her by injecting an air bubble into her head. That's my best assumption on that. So then the next scene, the camera goes back to the first-person view of Michael looking right at the door of the room that Laurie is in, because everybody else has exited the room. So Michael enters the room, stabs the bed with a scalpel. Laurie is gone, of course, because she knows that Michael is coming now. It shows Laurie limping down the hallway. Laurie goes into another room, grabs a phone. Oh god, I have hiccups. 1 second. Okay, I think I'm good now. Laurie tries to call someone in another room as Michael slowly follows her, stalks her down the hallway. Laurie looks down the hallway, sees nothing, falls back to sleep, so Michael doesn't know where Laurie is at this point in time. Then it flicks back to Dr. Loomis in the next scene. Dr. Loomis is taken away. Then it goes back to the hospital really quickly. Nurse finds Mr. Garrett's hat. Michael is seen on the security camera behind the desk walking down the hallway. Michael slowly veers off into this room. Michael enters, and the nurse is shown on the security camera walking the opposite way of Michael down the same hallway, so that kind of gives it a creepy effect. The nurse is looking for Mr. Garrett. Jimmy all of a sudden comes up behind the nurse, grabs her, scares her. Michael is actually in the room that she was about to walk into. You can see Michael's shadow in the, I guess the room divider kind of thing that they would put between the beds. So Jimmy tells her to go get help. And then the next scene, Jimmy searches for anyone else. Finds one of the nurses dead. Slips in her blood and ends up knocking himself unconscious on the floor. The last remaining nurse leaves the hospital, exits the hospital, I guess I should say, to look for help, only to find out her car won't start and her tires have been slashed. As she kind of backs up and sees that all the cars are the same. So then she goes back into the hospital because there's no other option really. Then this is the ending of the movie. The ending is actually quite long in this movie. It seems to be that, like, these scenes in this movie seem to drag out a little bit more than in the first one. So the ending, Laurie wakes up and gets back to her feet. Then the nurse that couldn't get away to go get help finds Laurie in the hospital. She calls for her, tells her to wait. All of a sudden, Michael comes out from behind this wall, stabs the nurse with the scalpel, picks her up. Laurie is clearly in fear now, so she runs because she has that adrenaline in her now, even though she has a broken leg, which is something I didn't want to mention till this point. So that's why she's been limping, why it's been hard for her to get around. She finds Mr. Garrett dead, hung up by a light cord, basically. So she jumps through this little window type thing to get away from Michael as he tries to slash at her to get her feet or cut her somehow. She's calling for the elevator, pressing the button as Michael slowly gets closer. Laurie just escapes because Michael's just about able to get his hand in between the door to stop it from moving. Laurie is able to make it outside of the hospital. She hides in a car. Then it goes back to Dr. Loomis. He's told about a file of Michael Myers that was never opened, stating that Laurie Strode is his sister. So that's a big point in this movie, because now you find out why Michael is actually hunting Laurie. I believe that Laurie was born 2 years before Michael was committed, and then 2 years after he was committed, she was adopted by the Strodes, and they said keep that private hush-hush, that file, don't let anybody know. So Dr. Loomis points the gun at the cop in the car, fires a warning shot at the passenger window. The car turns back around to the hospital because now he knows where Laurie is or has been taken. All of a sudden it goes back to Laurie in the car. Jimmy gets into it. He kind of has this weird look on his face, like he's not completely there. He tries to start the car, saying that they're going to get out of there. He passes out on the horn. The horn's blaring. Laurie moves him back. Laurie tries to then start the car, but has no luck either. So she gets out of the car. At this point, Dr. Loomis is pulling up to the door of the hospital. Laurie tries to yell for help, but it's too late as the doors close. She gets back up. She goes back towards the hospital, and then boom, Michael's right there chasing her again. She's screaming for help, rattling the doors, banging on the doors. The doors are locked. Michael's getting closer. Dr. Loomis then rushes to the door, gets Laurie just in the nick of time. This is one of my favorite scenes. Michael clearly doesn't need to use doors because he just walks right through the whole pane of glass in one fluid motion. Just smashes the whole door apart. So then right after that, Dr. Loomis has his gun pointed at Michael, shoots him another 5 times. So that's... Michael has been shot 6 times within 2 movies. And let's just say, and remember, this is all happening within like a 24-hour period, basically. So that's pretty crazy. So then the police officer that is with Dr. Loomis kneels down to check on Michael, even though Dr. Loomis advised him not to see if Michael is still breathing. The cop says he isn't, but then all of a sudden Michael just sits up and slits his throat with the scalpel. Laurie and Dr. Loomis run, obviously, because now Michael is chasing them again. Dr. Loomis and Laurie hide, but Michael already knows where they are, I guess. Marion is the name of the woman. She's outside calling for help, saying that Michael Myers is at the hospital. Dr. Loomis hands Laurie a gun because he knows she's probably going to have to use it. Michael just starts pounding on the door, eventually breaks through the door. Dr. Loomis goes to shoot Michael again, but his gun is empty. So, So Michael stabs Dr. Loomis. Dr. Loomis collapses. Laurie picks up the gun as Michael approaches her, calls him by name. Michael stops, turns his head. Then he comes forward again. Laurie shoots Michael in both of his eyes, and that's pretty good aim for, I'm assuming, somebody who probably has never really used a gun before, because there's no indication that she ever has in either of these movies. So that's dead on aim for Laurie. You gotta give her a round of applause for those 2 shots, because that's incredible. Where was I? So then Michael is obviously blind. He's holding his eyes. He can't see, so he starts slashing at Laurie blindly. Dr. Loomis and Laurie start turning on all the ether and oxygen in the room. Dr. Loomis tells Laurie to run. Dr. Loomis pulls out the lighter that the cop gave him earlier in the movie for a cigarette. He pulls it out, says to Michael, this time Michael, flicks it on, boom, another huge explosion in the hospital. Marion jumps out of her car, pans back to Laurie sitting on the ground. Michael all of a sudden comes out of the fire, and then he just collapses in the hallway. And then it zooms in on his mask burning. Then we go back outside of the hospital. Laurie is taken away in an ambulance. The camera goes back to Michael burning, and then Mr. Sandman starts playing. And I'm going to start watching Halloween 3 now, so that will be Thursday's review. This will be up on Tuesday with season 3 of The Big Bang Theory. Tuesday, I think I said right. Yes, Tuesday. Season 3 of The Big Bang Theory and Halloween 2 review. Halloween 3 will be on Thursday. That's it for this one. Like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.